So I'd like to ask everyone to please silence their cell phones. We'd like for you to be interactive using your phones throughout the presentation, but if you could just put them on silent or vibrate so that they don't distract from the presentation, that would be great. Also, there are several ways to ask questions. You're more than welcome to just raise your hand during the Q&A, but we'll also be taking questions via Twitter using the hashtag IST Startup and also on Poll Everywhere. And then at the end of the session, you guys can all pick up your stickers for your passports in the back. And if you need help with that, just please let me know at the end of the session. And then also, like I said, we encourage you guys to tweet and to use social media to showcase this. And then also you will be photographed and videotaped during the session. So if you would not like to be on camera, please move to the very back and see me afterwards. And like I said, if you guys have any questions, please see me after the session. And so now I'd like to introduce Michael Seibel. Michael is 31 years old and has lived and worked in the Bay Area of California for the past 8 years. During this time, he co-founded 2 startup companies, including Justin TV and Socialcam. So please join me in welcoming Michael Seibel.
All right. I'm really sorry I have to stand behind this podium, but this is the first time I'm giving this presentation, and I haven't memorized it yet. This fall, I'm going to be joining a program called Y Combinator. Do any of you guys know what Y Combinator is? Just raise your hands. Okay, that's good enough. Great. So this is kind of a summary of all of the advice that I give companies who participate in YC and who want to participate in YC. So for any of you guys who actually want to do a startup, this is going to be extremely useful. For anyone who doesn't want to do startup, this is going to be extremely boring. So prepare yourselves. All right, how to start a startup. Great, so the first thing is that everyone really makes a mistake when they think about what you need to start a startup. They think you need a really good idea, which I hate ideas. Ideas are really bad. This is what you actually need to start a startup. You need 2 to 4 people. At least 50% of them are engineers. You need a year's worth of cash each. You need to quit your job. After that, basically almost any idea will do. But if you don't do those things, you don't have a startup. So don't skip this stuff. Most often, you see people cheating all 3 of these things. They don't have a technical co-founder, they haven't saved any money, and they're not willing to quit their jobs. And when those people apply to YC, they're the easiest people to screen out. So now idea. So once you kind of have that core team set up, I usually kind of tell people 3 pieces of advice for coming up with a cool idea. The first is like brainstorm with your teammates. Developing the ability to talk to your teammates and to think about ideas together is extremely important. The second is use your personal experience. It's often easier to solve problems you've had yourself. The third is think about daily problems. And this is a little bit hard to explain, but basically a lot of companies fail because they're not solving a problem that people have very often. So like when you think about companies and when you think about ideas, think about how can I solve a problem that someone has every day? And I'll put it another way, how can my service be used every day? And oftentimes that's a good filter for ideas that really can't be very successful. So, market, super fast. People say this, and like I feel like I always thought it was very confusing when I started. Basically, like I summarize market very quickly. You just want a place where a lot of people are spending money, like a whole lot of people, like billions and billions of dollars are spent. And so that's another great filter for idea. If there's no billions, then just don't work on it, period. Just stop. The second is actually do some research. Like you would have no idea how many people will apply to YC and even make an interview, and then like we ask them like, oh, what do you know about your market? And they just say nothing, like I don't know. And it's like just like spend a day, like use the internet, it's not hard. And then the last one is actually use your competitors' products. I think that more often than not, a great way of understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it, what the value add is to see what's already out there. So that's it, super simple. This one's kind of boring. Basically, like, don't screw up on the legal. There's a site called clerky.com you can use to incorporate your company. Just use that. And what I would say is that, like, screwing up on the legal is just going to cost you some amount of money later that you probably don't have. So just do it with Clerky. So MVP. How many people know what MVP is? Okay, like less than half. Okay, So an MVP is a minimum viable product. Basically, it's like the simplest idea that you can actually launch. And most people screw this step up. Like step one, they screw up by putting too many features in their minimum viable product. So like the question I always ask people is like, how fast can you launch? People often will say, oh, we were planning to launch in like 3 months. And I say, well, can you launch in 3 weeks? And usually the process is of just removing features and getting yourself launched is a lot better for your startup than building a ton of features and waiting longer. So 2 months is good, but 2 weeks is even better for a lot of different software companies. The other thing I like to tell people is you're nothing till you launch. In Y Combinator, the most common piece of advice that we give a company is launch. That's it. If you haven't launched, that's the most common piece of advice. So the longer you wait, the more you're hurting yourself, just like plain and simple. You only start being able to really talk to your users after you have a product out there. So growth. Oftentimes we talk about growth. I like to really think about, I don't really like ads, but people use them. I really like to think about reference customers and using equal sharing. If you're building like a consumer product, like think something like Facebook or Twitter, I love the concept that using equals sharing. In other words, just by using your product, you're sharing it with your friends. A lot of times people think about growth as something to add on to their product. That's not the way to think about it. Think about it as using equals sharing. When you're talking about more B2B products that are less consumery, less going to go viral, I think it's all about reference customers. Can you actually make a company or a business partner extremely happy with your product? And if you can do that with 1, you can do it with 5, you can do it with 5, you can do it with 100, and so on and so forth. So that's what I like to focus on growth. Are people talking about your company? So this is another big thing that I think, in my first company anyways, we ignored quite a bit, PR. So oftentimes you'll be kind of told you should be using a PR firm. That's wrong. Oftentimes you'll be told you should be cold emailing reporters. That's wrong. Don't do that stuff. Do this stuff. So focus on features, fundraising, and stats. Those are the stories that you want to be telling to the press. Focus on the tech blogs, TechCrunch, and the like. Do it yourself and build relationships. Like talk to reporters in the real world. Go out for drinks, like meet people. It's a lot easier to get articles from people you know than to get articles from people you're cold emailing. Warm intros are extremely important. If you have friends who've been written out by these companies, by these reporters, they can make introductions, and you're basically 100 times more likely to get a story off of a warm intro than you are off of a cold email. Basically, like for PR, cold emails you should almost never be doing. The last thing I would say is like, know what the fuck you want to say. Like have your talking points. Like so many companies will screw that up and they'll talk to a reporter and they're like, and then, so just write down what you want to say and make sure you email the reporter afterwards. Fundraising. So I really like to simplify this for YC companies because it's something that can take a long time and really distract you from building your product. So I like to say is like less money is better than more money. Essentially, companies that run frugally tend to survive. And in startups, the longer you survive, the longer you're likely to be successful. Faster is better than slower. So if you have money being offered at good terms, take it. Don't try to over-optimize fundraising. And the last one is like have growth. Like the only thing that's valued in the Valley right now, unless you're Jack Dorsey, is your product is growing. So like oftentimes if you're having trouble fundraising or hiring or getting press, all of those things can be solved by growth. And so if you're not putting the time into growing your product, everything else that I said here will be a lot harder. So fundraising problems. If you're not able to raise money, like I just said, first thing you should be thinking about is can we grow and can we grow faster? The second thing you should think about is like, are we telling our story publicly? It turns out that investors spend most of their days trying to find companies to invest in. What you have to do is kind of get a third party to put your company in front of their face. That's what PR is pretty helpful for. So are you generating PR? If you aren't, think about that. Third is like building momentum and fear of missing out. This is kind of a little more advanced, but basically like an investor is much more likely to be the last investor in your round than the first investor in your round. The more you can convince the investor that you're almost done fundraising, the more likely it is for them to write a check. So figure out ways that you can do that and don't lie about it. And the last thing is like pitch angels who understand the problem. A lot of the times people want the biggest name angels, and the biggest name angels are very generalist, and they kind of chase after sexy products that are growing fast. But the country's huge. There are a lot of people who have money, and a lot of people who might understand the problem you're trying to solve who just don't angel invest every day as their job. So make sure that when you're trying to create a list of people you want to pitch, those people are included, because they're much more likely to give you some time, much more likely to be helpful to you, and much more likely to write a check. So operations. These are the three things I see companies screw up the most. After they raise money, they spend too much money. When Justin TV raised our first big round, it was $2 million, and that was $2 million more dollars than I've ever seen in my entire life. And my friends were like, why don't you just like move to Jamaica and like, take the money? And I was just like, that's pretty stupid. But then my other friends were like, oh, now you can like get a really nice office and like hire a bunch of people. And it turns out that was really stupid too. So if you raise money, like treat it like a very prized possession. Try to spend as little as possible. The other thing that companies will screw up on is they'll say, oh, we've raised all this money. We don't have to keep close track of what we're spending it on. And then they get in trouble because they spend half the money before they know it. So every month, you should look at every single transaction your company does, like every single one. We did this when the transaction list was over 1,000 items, because that's the only way you actually know what you're spending your money on. Otherwise, you're just relying on someone else, or you're just kind of guessing. And so definitely do that. And then when you do that, inevitably you will find a way to spend less money and do it. Even spending less money on the margin is good, because you want to establish in your company that you don't spend a lot of money. It's much better to have that kind of habit than to have the opposite. Hiring. Another thing that a lot of companies do right after they raise money is they hire too many people. One of the things that for both of the companies I did, we tried to figure out how to do was, how do we hire people who are only smarter than us? And that was kind of cool because it was harder as we went, right? Like the smarter you make your average talent, the more talented the people who come in later have to be. And I think that every company at some point drops off the cliff and starts recruiting people who aren't as talented. And oftentimes, if it's a company that hasn't really started to chug and get going, that can kill it. So thinking about hiring less. The second thing is like be fair and transparent. Like you got to tell people what their package is, and you've got to be very clear about it. If you're giving them stock, you got to tell them how much, and you should be giving them stock. You've got to tell them how much stock is in the whole company. Basically, like the more transparent you are with your employees, the fact that they know how much money is in the bank, how much money you've raised, who the other people are you're hiring, the more they're going to work hard for you. The more that it feels like the founders know everything and the employees know nothing, the more they're going to be looking for other jobs. So do that. And then the last thing is hire slow. Companies will be like, oh, we've raised, so now like we plan on hiring 2 to 4 people a month. And like that kind of like really, I never liked that mentality, because it was like you're basing how much hiring by how much time passes as opposed to need. I always like to think about it as like, we want to do the job before we hire someone to do the job, and we want it to be absolutely painful. Like I want to be hiring someone at almost the moment where I want to quit because my job is too hard. That's when you should be hiring. So if you actually want to apply to YC, how many of the people in this room might consider applying to YC within the next 2 years? Nice. T-Con and Dave. Okay. This is for you guys. So like I said before, you need to have 2 to 4 founders, and 50% of them have to be technical. Another thing is that we see a lot of companies where the founders haven't known each other for a very long time will actually fail during YC. I think the stats are around 25%. So basically 25% of the people who get into YC who haven't known each other for at least 6 months, their companies will break up within 3 months. So this isn't the time for shotgun weddings. Like, look for co-founders among the people who you know and you're friends with and you've worked with. Also, you have to be working full-time on your product. We have this kind of thought when we're looking at interviews, would this company exist without YC funding? If the answer is no, then like you don't get in. So definitely like be working full-time, be hardcore. I like to tell companies that it's really great if you've launched or your launch is imminent. Now, this doesn't really apply to every single company, but for most software companies, it does apply. It's just really hard to help a company pre-launch. It's a lot easier to help a company post-launch when they have users and they're talking to them. $1 billion market, we already talked about. Are you growing? We already talked about. The last thing, and I think one of the most important things, is like a lot of people think about getting into YC as the accomplishment, and it's not. Like being in YC is just as competitive as getting in. So about 3,000 companies will apply to YC every 6 months, and about 50 to 75 will get in. But then 3 months later, there's a demo day. And I would say that only 10 to 20 of those companies are able to extract the absolute maximum value from YC. They're able to raise the amount of money they wanted from the investors they wanted in a reasonable period of time. The rest of the companies have to work quite a bit harder. And so what I would say is, like, don't optimize for just getting into YC, optimize for trying to be at the top of your class, which might mean delaying for 6 months. It certainly means making sure you've got a technical co-founder, everyone knows each other, and you've launched. So the YC interview, and we're nearing the end here, thank God. So I'm not sure everyone knows, but basically the YC interview is 10 minutes long, which is kind of crazy. Basically, you only have 10 minutes to argue your case for why you should get into YC. And the 3 pieces of advice I would give you is talk first. If you can't explain what your company does without showing somebody what the company does, you need to spend a little bit more time. The second is, does your mom understand your 30-second pitch? Like, we have to be able to absorb what you guys do quickly. And so, like, if your mom doesn't understand it, change the language. Like, oftentimes the first 3 sentences out of the founder's mouths, and we're all really smart people, will be stuff we don't even understand. And we're just looking at them like, you just said a bunch of marketing words like strung together, and we have no idea what your company meant. And then you start off on a horrible foot. So, like, just make sure that your mom understands your first 30 seconds. Like, if I asked your mom, hey, what is, like, your son or daughter's company does, she'd be able to explain it. Probably just use her words. Like, they're probably better than yours. And then I think the last thing is, have you taught us something we didn't know? It's really nice to fund founders who feel like they are so deep into what they're doing that they're going to be working on this for the next 10 to 20 years. And so really, for the people who care about their company and their market that much, they know more than we do. So if we don't walk out of the rooms thinking to ourselves, wow, like I just learned something new, it's a really bad sign. Because if we know more about what your company's trying to do than you do, that's a very, very bad sign. So keep that in mind. Like, I like to call that unique insight. Like, make sure you understand, like, what's your unique perspective on your market or on your product, and make sure that's backed up with facts, like actual stats, something that we didn't know. That's it. So there is actually every single thing that I know about startups, and I think I did that in, like, how much time? Was that like 20 minutes? Beautiful. Okay, so now I can answer any or all of your questions about startups. I also currently work at a big company. It's called Autodesk. So if any of you guys are actually trying to get jobs at big companies, I can also talk to you about how that might or might not suck a lot. So all right, let's do it.
You mentioned when you're building a product for the consumer facing, you want to build it with growth already in mind.
Yes.
So how do you do that best with a B2B product, like a software as a service product?
So what I would say is that, like, I would distinguish straight consumer products where you want to be thinking about growth being kind of built into the product, from software as a service where you want to be thinking about reference customers, right? So, like, in those cases, you're not thinking about, oh, if, you know, Sears uses it, like, they're going to share it on their Twitter or something like that, right? You're very much thinking, like, who are the 3 or 4 customers I can get that will open up verticals of other customers? So if somebody sees that X, Y, and Z company is using my product, they're going to be interested in using my product too. That's the best way for those guys to grow. Sorry, I didn't repeat the question. I apologize.
We have a question in regards to Socialcam.
Yeah.
In regards to Socialcam, what would you have done differently? Was there anything that you did that you would have, like, in hindsight, you would have liked to have done differently?
This is on camera. What would I have done? I'll answer that. Yeah, no. There's something I would have done differently. So, Socialcam grew really big, really fast. If I would have done anything differently, I might have tried to slow the growth to keep it more sustainable. I think that like 2020, we had a lot of ability to control how fast we were growing, and 2020 hindsight, I might have slowed it down a little bit. But that's like not a problem that most people will have. Steve has that problem. Yeah.
Can you tell the story of how you got that?
Oh God. Can I tell the story about how we grew really fast at Socialcam? So, to provide context, so over the course of 4 months, about 1/8 of all of the people on Facebook watched a Socialcam video, which was kind of crazy. How did we do it? So basically, we were competing with this other company named Vidi, which was another mobile video sharing company. We were a mobile video sharing company as well. And Vidi got this integration with Facebook. And after getting this integration, I don't need to go through the details, they shot up to #1 in the App Store. So you see your #1 competitor is now the #1 app being downloaded in America. And we were like, you know, the 800th app being downloaded in America. And so we freak out and we're just like, this is the worst thing in the universe. And so we see what they're doing, and we realize that we actually have to get Facebook to approve us to do something very similar. And so I have a friend I went to college with who works at Facebook. So I call him and I say, hey, let's get this done. And he says, sure, it'll be like 2 days. And so we wait. And like every day, like they are 1 and we are 800. So like every day they're adding like 250,000 more downloads than we are. They're just murdering us daily. And so we sit there and we're like, 2 days have passed and no emails, no calls, no nothing. And so we're freaking out. And so I call my friend again. And he's like, oh, it's being processed. This was a Friday. He's like, it's being processed. Like it'll happen in 48 hours. So 48 hours passes. It's now Sunday. I count weekends, especially when my competitor's kicking my ass. And so on Sunday night, I'm like, this is really, really bad. Come Monday morning, we're still not approved. My co-founder, Amin, bless his heart, he says to me, Mike, have you really tried like everything possible to get this approval from Facebook? And to be clear, this is like a tiny thing for Facebook, right? This is not some big strategic BD discussion. It's like someone has to click some switch somewhere. And I'm like, no, I haven't. So that day, we basically contact every single one of our angel investors. And we simultaneously email the CTO of Facebook, the COO of Facebook, the head of developer relations, like the VP of like biz dev, basically like the entire exec like team except for Mark Zuckerberg. And then I'm like, okay, well, we've actually done everything humanly possible to like get this approval. So it turns out that every single one of those people forwards the email to my friend. And my friend's like freaking out. He's like, what did you guys do? And I was like, hey, you said 48 hours and we're getting our asses kicked. And the next day, the switch was flipped. And to this day, he claims that like it was all gonna happen on Tuesday and we should have just waited. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably not what happened. So yeah, so basically we then got on Facebook and we instantly shot up to #8 in the App Store, which was crazy. And then we kind of had a fight in our hands, which we eventually won. So that was how we did that. Now, there's so many stories I would tell if we weren't on camera. Is there any way to go off camera? Oh. I've got a great Justin Bieber story, but like, I really can't tell it on camera. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, awesome. Let's do that now, so we'll tell good stories. Yeah, good stories are better than like, yeah. Or do you guys want to hear the Justin Bieber story? All right, let's do it. Got fun stories from Socialcam. No, 1 second. What other part of the Facebook story? Which button? Oh, like what we did afterwards? No.